Now I use free AI tools to turn walls of text into chunks that I can finally remember. So today I'm going to teach you how to study with ADHD. I'm going to give you tips, how to use AI, how to create visuals, and the science that's behind all of it. This is how I'm able to remember what I read and study with my ADHD brain. Most study advice assumes that your working memory is calm, organized, and ready. Mine is not. When I see a dense chapter or a long PDF or a huge answer that comes back from AI, my brain just starts dropping into pieces. ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Notebook LM, they can all help, but if they all give you a wall of text, it still creates the same problem. So the goal is not just to use AI, but to use AI to structure the information. So today, I'm going to show you how to use Google Canvas, also known as Gemini Canvas, to turn the information and dense text into chunks and visual assets. This is not just a productivity ADHD hack. This is real science based on George Miller's studies back in 1956. George Miller made chunking famous with the idea that short-term memory has limits. And now I'm just going to walk you through some of that research. And here we have George Miller and Nelson Cohen. George Miller conducted a study with about 20 students back in 1956, and he ended up realizing that between 5 and 9 chunks was best for an average human memory span. Nelson Cohen, many years later, in a 2001 paper, did a study of over 5,000 students and realized that there was a magic number, 4, for the amount of chunks that the brain is best able to memorize. And George Miller was the headline maker. He was the first one to come upon this information and do this kind of study. But truly, Cohen was the actual precision scientist that was able to refine the science and do a better study with a lot more students. Dense text is exhausting for anyone, but for someone like me with an ADHD brain, it's even more overwhelming. With no visual structure, there is a high cognitive friction. John Sweller conducted a study with 20 students in his geometry class. He realized that if you were to take long documents and compare to a chunked format, this was based on 160 words in each, but different delivery. Chunking is structure, with logical concept groups, low reading friction, and clear learning paths. We are already used to this concept. If we take a look at this group of numbers, it doesn't make as much sense as when compared to when we break them apart and actually chunk them in groups. This provides meaning for the brain. Going back to Cohen, he was able to prove that 4 chunks were best, but the original study showed that between 4 and 5, depending on the person. By creating 4 chunks and adding numbers to them, you actually create a new system which helps the brain identify the different groups. Cognitive overload is the main issue here, especially with a brain like mine that can get really busy up there, but also for people that are trying to read long forms of text, whether it be from AI responses or long documents, long emails. Each brain has a fixed mental capacity. And that matters when it comes to long text. Usually within long text, in a narrative form, it's filled with a lot of other words that are not necessary for the overall concept to be remembered. Most brains actually like structure when trying to take in new information, and this matters for those with brains that are just really busy. Back to Sweller's study, he was able to show that extraneous load, which is the ideal way of learning information for an individual, when combined with the concept content from the intrinsic load, ends up creating a better and more productive outcome. I've been a tutor and I'm currently a corporate trainer, and I've done lots of corporate training in my day. I've come to realize that most people will actually scan through documents when they're trying to extract information during their first introduction to the document. And this was made very clear when there was a study conducted by Jacob Nielsen back in 2006. What he realized is that there is this diagonal, almost like a lightning bolt shape, which is known as the chaotic path. Many people use this to scan for keywords as they read through. If we focus on a guided scan with chunks, it helps the brain break apart and understand that information easier. This concept was proven by Nielsen having a study, 232 users, and tracking the eye movements of each one of them while they were looking at new documents they've never seen before. So for some of us that are neurodivergent, we need low friction when we take in new information and we're trying to study and memorize anything. Many people within the autism community need clear structure, and those with dyslexia, it's been proven that they need bounded regions in order to take it in and not get overwhelmed. Another important reason to have 4 chunks is that anything beyond that, the brain automatically starts counting. When you're trying to remember not just the count, but also the information that's within the chunk, it's extra information and extra work that the brain has to do. Chunking the information is not everything. It can only get you to a certain level of memorization and studying. For most of us with ADHD, rereading just fails. That's where another solution comes into play, which is active recall and testing yourself to remember the information. A study conducted back in 2000 2006 shows that after 7 days, there was a 90% retention rate when combining the chunking with the active recall methods, for instance, like quizzing or flashcards. Not only does the chunking, but also the active recall mean a lot for the remembering and also working through the overwhelm, but visual scaffolding is the next key part of this. Usually when we declutter, we organize. This happens in life in all of our daily activities, whether it be in a home or in our office or on our desk. Same thing applies for long form of text. When we organize it in the right way, not just by chunks, but also by spacing, it really helps the brain take it all in. Here we can see the comparison of all the research studies of the chunks and the active recall compared to other methods that are employed today, one of which being mind maps. Mind maps are great for breaking apart text, but for those of us that have a different way of learning, they can still be very overwhelming. Chunking and active recall as a combination has the highest percentage of structure and memory. Now let's apply what I showed you. We're going to go ahead and use some free tools, and we're going to find some prompts that I already put together on chunky.study. You can navigate to the free prompts library. I have 65 prompts in here. Whether you're an adult learner, ADHD or not, whether you're a student or you're a parent or teacher trying to help someone. And I'm going to go through all the steps with an extra bonus trick at the end, so please stick around. And I'm going to go through this step by step, do a few different examples, and show you some tips and tricks with all the tools. And let's start with reading, since that was the basis of the information in the research. All you have to do is type it in. You don't even have to press enter, and it'll already populate on the bottom here. For this first example, reading breakdown helper. It's exactly what it sounds like, but we can use any one of the most popular AI tools, ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. Just remember, if you're going to use Gemini, you want to add Canvas. Sometimes people call it Google Canvas. That's okay. Technically, it's Gemini Canvas, though. What we're going to do is use this prompt and pop it into Gemini with the Canvas activated. I'm going to go down to the bottom and just click on Copy Prompt. Now, let's open Gemini. And here, I'm already signed in. But if it's your first time using Gemini, you could just go to gemini.google.com. It's going to bring you to a similar looking web page like this. You're just going to go up into the top right and sign in. You can use an existing Gmail account or any other email address, or you can create a new account if you need to. So like I was saying before, with Gemini, you have to turn on Canvas. We're going to do that by clicking on the plus sign, going down to Canvas, and selecting that. What Canvas does is that it opens up an artifact that allows for visual code. Now, we're just going to go into the box and paste in the prompt. As you can see, there are two places at the bottom of the prompt that you want to adjust. The first one is the grade level. So for this assignment, I decided to use an article that's based on the birds of Oregon. It's about 2,000 words. And this could be a popular assignment that someone would have to remember or do work from or create some kind of essay. We'll say 8th grade. And as you can see in the bottom spot here, this is where we're going to paste in the article. Now that I have my whole article in here, and with the prompt at the top, I'm going to go ahead and send this in the Gemini. Here, as we can see, it opens up this artifact window in the right side. As you can imagine, it's actually writing all the code to do all of the visuals, chunking the information, and provide all of the different buttons for interactive features. We can take a peek at this happening by clicking on code in the top right. If we scroll down, we will see that Gemini is actively writing out the code for this HTML single page. And if you're not aware of this, HTML is a basic web page code that started in the 90s. Now that we can see HTML is the last line that was written, that means it's done. So we can go back and click on preview. And here you have it. We have an entire 2,000 word article broken apart into chunks, and it gives us some guidance along the left here. As you probably noticed, these are actually drop downs. So we're going to go ahead and click on one to take a peek inside. Within each of these, we can tell that there are a few different sections. There's a focus part, vocabulary to highlight, which gives some definitions if we want, and then also some things for us to consider down below. If you're a parent, it actually has a prompt here to help your child, or whoever else you're helping with this, learn about the topic better. To the left of that, it gives it some active comprehension questions, just for people to logically think through. But I don't know about you, but this text is too small for me. I wanted to give the option with this prompt that if you wanted it to be more condensed with information, you can leave it as is. But for me, I'm going to tell Gemini to increase the font size. And we're going to say increase font size 2x. Now Gemini is going back through the code and adjusting it wherever the font shows up. And for this part, I'm just going to leave the preview button on so we could just see it appear when it's ready. It may seem like some of these things are out of line. The title seems like it's coming out of the box, but that's okay because what Gemini actually expects us to convert this into something else. And I'll show you how to do that now. If you go to the top right, you can see there's a few different options here. Console, you can ignore that for now. That'll be later used for different apps and testing apps. Download, which we will come back to in a moment. And then we can refresh or we can share this. If you send this to somebody, it's not going to immediately just send this artifact the way that you see it here. You're actually going to be sending them a link, which is going to be opening Gemini in their own webpage. For now, we're going to be downloading this. After you download it, you can actually just hit this arrow with the box, and that just means to open it in a different tab. Once we open it in a different tab, this is what Gemini was actually expecting. If we look back over to the left, we can see how it says how to scaffold reading properly within that box. And if we scroll through, we can see that all the spacing and all the text is a little bit easier to read, at least for me. As I was showing before, you can click to open all of these. We can go through and we can understand more about the topic that we had a hard time reading. We can scroll through and we can learn easier about that article. Let's go back to chunky.study to grab another prompt to show you something else. Now let's pretend that you have some test prep to do. We're going to go to the homework start section and we're going to go down here to test prep. Copy that prompt and go back in the Gemini. Remember to turn on the canvas. We're going to paste that prompt in. And at the bottom, we're going to put the topic, Birds of Oregon, with an arbitrary test date. Okay, it's about a minute later and Gemini is finally done. Just at a first glance, I'm not actually liking the color of this. It's a little bit too stimulating, so remember, you have full control. I'm going to give it an instruction to use some softer colors. I'm going to tell it to redo the colors with soft maroon and a soft gray blue. Okay, it's done, and that's a lot nicer to look at for me. Now I'm going to put it in its own tab. I'm going to download, and then I'm going to hit the arrow for open. So now that I'm looking at it at full width, I can breeze through here and extract any of the information and also test myself for prep. Additionally, it actually puts in a 25-minute Pomodoro timer just so I can stay on track. So not only does it spread my test prep plan across a few days, but it also gives me some other cool things in here too. I can check on these boxes once I memorize things, and it informs me that there's a task complete. Additionally, I can come over here and it sets targets for me. It even gives mnemonics. If I really wanted to, I could go back over to Gemini and ask it to change the mnemonics to something else that I prefer. Going back to the research about active recall, there is a active recall box down at the bottom right, which you could just basically think as a small quiz. Whoops, probably should have studied more. Now, I promised earlier that I would show you a bonus trick. This is something I think very important for when I'm not at home and I don't have my laptop with me, or if I'm just on another computer. I'm going to show you how to do this really quick and for free. So what we're going to do is use Google Sites, just a free website generator that Google offers, and we can actually use some of its functionality in a creative way. This is going to be the screen that you see when you go to sites.google.com. And just remember, you're going to have to be signed in. It'll automatically sign you in though if you just created an account and you're signed into Gemini and if you're using Chrome. We're going to go to blank site. This is going to be your own personal study website. It's going to be really cool and super helpful. For right now, we're going to go back to Gemini and we're going to click on code. As I was showing you before, all of those visual assets are actually backed by this code here. We're going to click inside this big box and we're going to just select all of that. I'm using a Mac, so I'm doing Command A. And if you're on a PC, you're going to want to be doing Control A. Then we're going to copy. I'm going to use Command C. PC, you can use Control C. After we copy the code, we're going to go back over to Google Sites. Instead of adding it to the front page here, we're going to be going over to Pages on the top right, hover over the plus sign, and then go up to full page embed. Now you can give a name for it and you can click done and it's going to automatically open up that page for us. As you would imagine, you go to add embed. Here we have to make sure that we click over on embed code. We paste it in. Now we hit next and it gives us a little preview. You can't see the full width of the web page, but usually if you see at least a little bit of it, it's going to be fine. We click insert to confirm and here we have our web page, which is custom and free. Now remember, once it's locked into the Google site, if you want any changes to be made, for instance like the color that I did before, you're going to have to go back to Gemini, add in the changes, and it's going to change the code and you're going to have to copy and put it in again. However, if you'd like this to be more automatic and not have to copy and paste the code every time you want a change to be made, I'll show you how, and it's in the playlist of this video. So we're not quite done yet though. We do need to publish this, but before we do that, we can just add something to this homepage here. I like to push Gemini to do some creative things, so I'm going to give you a cool idea that can do that. I'm going to open up a new Gemini. I'm going to turn on Canvas again. And quite appropriately for the shirt that I'm wearing, I'm going to ask for some 80s designs. Originally, I was thinking of a screensaver, but instead, I think I'm going to go with 3D. And the 3.js is just a little trick. It's a JavaScript library which is best for 3D objects. Now, because this is for 3D objects, it takes a little bit longer to code. All right, it's all done, and I think this is pretty cool. Okay, so I copied the code, and now I'm back over here on the web page. So now we're going to hit publish, and we can pick a name for this. Did I mention I was also dyslexic? Now we can publish this, and you'll see on the bottom here, it pops up this little pop-up that says we can view it. If this happens to disappear or you forget where it goes, you can always go to the drop-down up in the top right where the publish is. You can hit View Published Site. And we see we have this really cool thing that welcomes us with the robots and very 80s themed. We can drag it around in a different type of view, and I think it's just really cool. We added this second page, Oregon Bird Study, and this is where our test prep and our study guide lives. And that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot, and we're going to be doing a lot more with AI in these next few videos. Be sure to check the links in the description and go to chunky.study to get your free prompts and for other homework help too.